3, 2, 1, blast off. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, your weekly visit with two talking heads talking with you about the services, strategies, and success tips you need to make it big in managed services. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm the Chief Analyst and Channel Master of the organization responsible for this podcast. I am joined this week, as I am every week, by your other co-host, our Chief Strategist and Channel Master, Eric Simpson. Eric, how goes it?
Doing well, Rich. Doing really well, in fact. I'm getting ready for some more events that we'll be traveling to. You and me have been on the road recently. You've been globe trotting. I've been kind of, U.S. trotting. So looking forward to your story of the week, which has to do with where you were just at a few days ago, right?
Well, not even a few days ago. I left this particular conference less than 24 hours ago as we're recording this right now. I spent a few days this week in Nashville, Tennessee, attending HP's Amplify event, which is their big partner and end user event. And I will be writing about this in my blog, Channelholic. I haven't actually written about it yet, so you're getting my first kind of take on what I heard there. But it was interesting, Eric, because I think it fits into a lot of stuff that we've talked about on the show here, and sheds some interesting light on the hardware business in particular. Now, typically you go to an HP event like this, and what you expect to hear a lot of from the stage is look at these amazing new devices that we're rolling out here, and let's talk speeds and feeds and specs and use cases and why your client should be using that stuff. And I mean, they unveiled a little bit over 80 different products across PCs and printers and peripherals and you name it. So it's not as if they didn't have hardware news. And yet what struck me in the audience attending the show is how little stage time they directed at the products as products. What they very much wanted to talk to the folks in their audience about was solutions. Using hardware plus software plus services to address pain points, to produce business outcomes. That was the top. This is what, and they do a lot of what they might call transactional business with a segment of the partner base, and they don't anticipate that changing. There are going to be people out there who are resellers, and they have clients who just refresh the laptop fleet every few years, and all they want from HP is to understand what device is going to be the best fit for that customer, so they can order that stuff and get that rolled out to the client base. But their strategic future, as they see it, is built around this idea that what end users want isn't hardware, isn't devices, it's solutions, and devices are very much a part of solutions, right? We are. There used to be an executive at Tech Data before the TD Synnex merger who ran their endpoint solutions group, and she had a line she used all the time that I loved, which was basically, until they figure out how to beam the information into our heads, every solution you guys deliver is going to involve endpoints. Hardware is part of what this industry does, and will remain a part of this industry, but some of the HP executives I spoke to said themselves, it is essentially on its own a commodity. Where you start to get margin, where you start to get stickiness is when it is part of a solution. And that is as true for HP itself as it is for its partners. And so that's what they spent their time talking about. Incorporating the AI piece of this and the AI capabilities included in the dozens of AI PCs that they introduced at the event this week. So it's really just kind of a sign of the times in terms of where the hardware industry is and where it's going, Eric. I don't think this is exclusive to HP or will be exclusive to HP, where they understand it's going to get harder and harder for them and for their partners to just talk about devices and buying devices and refreshing devices. That's going to get more and more commoditized and less in keeping with the market and what buyers are interested in talking about. And you're going to see even these giant hardware makers reflect that in how they go to market and what they go to market with.
Well, Rich, you had me at solutions. I mean, that's all I needed to hear. And it's and I don't know if it's like this amazing like pivot, right? I think that the industry and hardware manufacturers in general have realized that it's the pull through of the services that allows the gross profit margin of these devices to increase for providers. I mean, we know it as MSPs. We know that, you know, the days of getting 35, 40 points on just selling a piece of hardware are long gone in the past. But I do work with lots of mature partners, Rich, that can get 25, 30, 35 points on that hardware when it's bundled in with additional services and solutions and infrastructure upgrades and things like that. So, if you start looking at what business owners want, they want solutions, they want business outcomes. They're not, I know there's a very specific way that Apple, for instance, releases the new devices, and it's this huge thing. But boy, oh boy, I would love to see, a session about how taking, the MacBook and deploying it as part of a large solution and helping partners price and justify that would look from Apple's perspective. I think we've been conditioned to be like, it's the big event. What are they going to release? And it's all about that hardware product. But it sounds like HP now is saying, oh, yeah, we're going to teach you how to bundle the stuff into solutions that incorporate the hardware, but also allow you to maximize your revenue and stickiness and strategic value to clients because you're now talking about outcomes and solution-based selling and business outcome-based selling. I like it.
You use the word conditioned, or being conditioned a few moments ago, and you were also kind of talking about how this really shouldn't be an amazing pivot for HP. And I'm totally with you. I think if not the majority, then something very close to the majority of their partners are seeing and hearing what we're talking about here, which is the appetite for solutions as opposed to products. But there is this I asked some of the executives I interviewed, it's like, how heavy a lift do you think it's going to be to get people going along with you down the solutions road? And they said it's going to take some education because a lot of their partners are conditioned to think of HP as a device company, and that's how they've always interacted with them before. To get them thinking more in terms of solutions. And the other thing that it's not even like just PCs. They made some updates or announced some updates to the partner program this week that are really designed to get people combining PCs and printers and peripherals and services, and they're rewarding partners for selling all of those things together. That's a different way of doing business with HP for a lot of these folks, and so it will actually take them a little time to reorient people about this different way of partnering with them.
Yeah, and I think that the way to get MSPs and resellers to really move in a different direction is to incentivize them to do that. It sounds like their strategy, Rich, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is like if you're bundling all of these different products into services and delivering solutions, maybe there's a better incentive or a discount rate or something that you can achieve. If that's what you're talking about, then I think that's the quick way to get partners to perk up. I'm curious what percentage of HP products are sold via just typical VAR and resellers as opposed to MSPs. Do you have any sense for that?
I don't, although I would guess that their partner base skews heavily in the direction of VARs and solution provider as opposed to MSPs specifically, but I don't know for certain there. And your intuition about the partner program changes is exactly right, by the way. And I don't have all of the details down, but the idea is the more elements of the portfolio you include in deals, the more margin that you get. And the number that they kept repeating was you can earn up to an incremental 40% basically on a deal if you get all four of these different buckets involved in a deal. So yeah, they're trying to do exactly what you're saying, is give people dollars and cents business incentive to follow them along on this portfolio-wide, solution-oriented kind of path.
Well, those breadcrumbs are music to partners' ears. More incentives, more incremental, discount rates and things like that. Sign them up.
Yeah, this particular set of incentives is they're calling it the Superpower Booster. You can go look that up online after you've finished enjoying this episode of the show and get some more details. Well, let's move on to your tip of the week, Eric. In last week's episode of the show, we were talking about these forthcoming pricing options from ConnectWise, which are designed to add some more predictability into what you pay and how you budget for the software that you use. Your tip of the week this week kind of flips that around a little bit in terms of helping MSPs get some more predictability, not in terms of what they pay, but in terms of what they make.
Yeah, Rich. And I think for, some of our listeners, this may seem pretty 101-ish, but, in my experience, I've, as we run our businesses, we learn a methodology that seems to work. And then over time, sometimes we start taking a few shortcuts, and maybe by the time, more time passes, we encounter a situation that forces us to go, oh my goodness, we've got to go back to the basics. I mean, why did we stop doing that? All of a sudden it makes a lot of sense to go back and, review the 101 stuff, the basics that built the organization that we may have at some point gotten away from. So this is kind of like revisiting some of these basics, Rich, for MSPs, building more predictable revenue from just 3 quick tips that are going to be, familiar to some MSPs. And I bet some of our listeners might think, oh yeah, maybe we should revisit that. Maybe we've gotten away from that. So number 1, the more revenue, obviously this is a no-brainer for MSPs that have been around. They understand this, and especially with valuations being the way they are as MSPs are being acquired or rolled up. For some new MSPs or folks thinking about starting MSP practice, the higher percentage of fully managed services, recurring revenue that you generate, the more valuable your organization becomes. The higher profit margins you're going to achieve, which means you can reinvest in growing the business. You can reward your teams. You can hire the right folks. You can invest in the right tools and technology, the higher profit margins you are realizing. So transitioning to more fully managed services, getting away from more transactional resale products, time and materials type of billing, reliance on reselling hardware only without services and solutions around them, are the guidance here, Rich. Number 2, again, kind of we think we know that, but are we really doing it? Standardizing your offerings across all of your clients. Rich, and listeners to our show know that I am a big believer in good, better, best bundling and pricing solutions. So even if we have just one offering, is it standardized across all of our clients? I'll bet you, Rich, that a lot of MSPs are like I was back before we sold our MSP practice. And we had legacy clients that had completely different solutions from what we were selling the next new client tomorrow. So how do we get everybody standardized using the same products so that our team is being trained and can deliver efficient services, managing our recommended portfolio of services, including hardware, including solutions and things like that? Number 3, man, this one's tough, Rich, because when we have MSPs like we were, there are some MSPs that subscribe, Rich, to I'm good with getting everything from less vendors or one primary vendor, where my subscription to their platform or services, some PSA vendors are like this, where they give me everything I could possibly need to deliver these services, and then I deliver it to my clients. And that makes automated billing and payment processing and all that really, really simple. But some MSPs want kind of best of breed. And so we're going out directly to different vendors, and we are purchasing what we feel should be our recommended portfolio of services and then delivering it to our clients, Rich. And in those cases, just ensuring that we have all of those platforms integrated properly so that we can manage the invoicing and the payments much more seamlessly rather than be doing these one-offs and things like that. And trying to standardize from a higher percentage of our portfolio things that aren't that segment out the consumption-based billing versus the standardized billing. So if we have to bill twice a month, Rich, then the initial bill goes out in advance of each month for our standard fully managed services, and then maybe we do another invoice run at the middle of the month to catch up on the consumption-based billing that we do for clients such as Azure and other licenses that are consumption pricing. So again, it's not the best of both worlds, but at least it's better than just doing billing, delaying billing and things like that. I've got clients that I've worked with, Rich, in the past that, are catching up for, bills that had to go out, invoices that had to go out to their clients 2 months ago. And that's not good for anybody.
This is a great topic, Eric, and I love the way you kind of set it up because these are not big, bold, new ideas. These are things that you were doing, hopefully learned at least to do early on in your MSP, your managed services journey. And over time kind of drifted away from, as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking back. You're in Southern California where I grew up partly. And, you go out to the beach, you go swimming in the ocean, you're focused on the waves and your friends and the fun. And you look at the shore and realize that, a tide or something has kind of shifted you up the coast a little bit. And okay, I better go back to where I was before. This is exactly the kind of thing that can happen when you're running a business. And the middle example you provided there around standardization is a classic example of that, where, it hopefully early on, you realized the benefits of standardization. You had a standard set of good, better, best packages. You were selling that to everybody. But over time, you make an exception for this person or for that person. And before you know it, there is much less standardization in the business than there used to be. And this is all kind of coming off the bottom line. So, just like it kind of makes sense to reorient yourself against the coastline now and again when you're swimming out in the ocean, taking a step back, looking at, how far have you drifted away from those really good, solid managed services best practices, I think is a really smart idea.
I love the analogy, Rich. It reminds me of that song "Drift Away," right? So I'm thinking, yeah, and this is how it starts. Like it's like you think, oh, I have this huge opportunity for this client, but they don't, they've standardized on this piece of hardware, or this software solution, and that now because the potential to close that business and get that revenue right now is so attractive. That's kind of how we start drifting away. Like you say, it's like, okay, we'll take that deal. And all of a sudden now we've got this one client that uses one piece of software, and, only one technician on our team is really the guru of it. And boy, when they're sick or out, that causes a problem for us. Right. So again, it's a worthy endeavor to strive for, but sometimes there are these exceptions that, don't appear to be such a big deal until they are.
Okay, folks, we're going to take a quick break here. On last week's episode of the show, when Eric was doing his tip of the week, he was talking about the increasing importance, and particularly going forward, the enormous importance of being able to offer compliance as a service to your customers. And I told him, I've got great news for you, because next week's interview guest works exactly in that space. And here we are. Moments from now, we're going to be joined by Tim Golden. He's the founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard. And we're going to get into that topic with him and talk a little bit about some of the 1, 2, 3s, the ABCs of getting into that compliance as a service space for MSPs. Stick around, folks. Tim is going to join us in just a moment. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, our Spotlight interview segment, where we are very pleased to be joined by the founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard. His name is Tim Golden. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you? So glad to be here, Rich and Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
So you and I have spoken a few times in the past, but for the benefit of folks in the audience here who are new to you, new to Compliance Scorecard, just give them a little bit of background about both.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help MSPs have the risk conversation with their customers using our scorecards.
Very simple, clear value proposition. I appreciate that. I think if memory serves correctly, the last time we spoke, it was as I was researching an article for my blog, Channelholic, about the compliance opportunity. And the fact that a lot of MSPs, in my experience, they have clients who need help with compliance. They understand the scale of the need and the opportunity and so on, but they are literally afraid to get into that market because it's very complicated. It can be very expensive, and if they screw something up, they're worried about the risk associated with that. So just to kind of kick things off, for the folks in our audience here who are in that camp, who are a little concerned, is this something I even want to get into? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you started with the fear component, right? Because we hear that a lot. There's some MSPs that are obviously super mature and are like maybe doing some of this kind of work in Excel spreadsheets. So they're kind of already doing the work and wanting to be able to like have a tool, have a platform, have a thing to do that work at scale. And then you have the other side, which is, I think I know I'm supposed to do this. A customer asked. I can't even spell socks. I know I barely even wear shoes. What do I do? And, we do hear that fear sometimes in prospects and existing customers. The reality is it doesn't have to be scary. It does have to get done, but, with the right people and the right process and the right platforms, it actually can be very lucrative business for MSPs to kind of help, because they are the ones that are best positioned to understand the technology that their customers, they're the ones best positioned to do the work. Now, I get it. Like, I remember the first time I ever took a computer apart, I was terrified. I break it, I'm going to have extra screws. But the more I took computers apart, now it's like I can swap a hard drive all day, any day. Compliance is new. It's like we haven't done it before. We don't know. We don't want to get it wrong. And that's okay, because you aren't compliant on day one. It is an ongoing thing. And as I said, with the right people and the right process and the right platform, you can make it a business differentiator for you as an MSP.
So, Tim, you touched on the opportunity for MSPs, right? Rich just talked about, compliance and fear, but where there's fear and there's risk, there is opportunity for MSPs. Absolutely. So from where you're sitting, how do you feel about the size of the opportunity for MSPs? Do you see it growing? And if so, is it going to be growing exponentially? We're all kind of watching what's happening with these cyber threats and the increase and all that. So what would you say to MSPs that are considering when to begin looking at compliance and delivering compliance as a service as it relates to the opportunity, and maybe some first mover advantage tips?
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, I don't know if you're familiar with Blue Ocean and the concepts around that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. When we look at the GRC space and the compliance space, like the ocean doesn't even exist at the moment. And what does exist is barely, what I like to say, negative market penetration, right? The number of MSPs actually being able to do compliance and do compliance well is slim to none. So there is opportunity. The ocean is vast. It is deep. If we talk to our friend Jay McBain and Canalys Research, you'll see, it's $1 billion industry down the road, or multi-billion-dollar industry down the road. For MSPs, the opportunity of starting with getting your own house in order Pick something, CIS, FTC, even something as simple as cyber liability insurance, right? The 6 or 8 or 10 basic things that insurance carriers are offering and asking for. You can build a compliance as a service offering probably based off of the things you might already be doing. Adding 1 or 2 components to that, between backup and multi-factor and policies and procedures, conducting an assessment, you can build a compliance as a service offering with things you might already have in place, with a little repackaging, a little rebranding, a little messaging, and then being able to take that to your customers with that opportunity to really reduce that risk, build the defensibility, all while doubling your revenue in the process.
So you just alluded to the acronym GRC there, and obviously compliance is the C part of that. But there's governance and there's risk or risk management involved in GRC as well. Help folks in the audience distinguish a little bit between compliance versus GRC. And the different levels of complexity, the degree to which you can do one piece of that or kind of need to do the whole thing.
Yeah. So first, breaking compliance down into very simple terms. I like to think of compliance as the referee for the security program. There's a playbook, there's rules, there's guidance, there's controls and frameworks and things. There's a playbook there that gives you best practices and how to do the work, what to be looking out for, and then throwing flags when things are out of compliant, right? They're the ones that know the rules. They're the referee down on the field. You are all playing the game, but you can look at the framework, the controls, the things. So compliance is that referee while you're in the game. Now, the GRC component, the governance component, everybody thinks, what does that mean? The feds, oh no. Governance is actually broken down into really one simple word. That means to govern. And if you look up in history, that means to govern was actually about taking a ship and governing through the channels or guiding through the channels so that you're not hitting rocks or, lighthouses and all that fun stuff. So the govern component is that guiding factor. It is steering the ship, or in this case, steering your customer through that compliance framework, right? So governance is all about a process, and the governing or the steering or the process of working through a framework. Compliance, obviously, I just said that. Risk, we kind of all know what risk means, right? So GRC is really steering the ship with the referee at the side, making sure that you're reducing the risks along the way.
Tim, I love that you use the analogy of building a service around compliance to a cyber insurance policy. I talk about that a lot, candidly. I mean, that is to me, the minimum. This is where you start. Every client needs cyber insurance. So one way to have the conversation with a client to convince them to invest more in your services isn't just because you're asking them to, but it's really by mapping it to what their insurance policy says they need to be doing and asking them, are you willing to have your claims denied because we're not doing this stuff for a few bucks a month? I don't think so, but I appreciate that. I just want you to know that. But sticking back to the GRC kind of conversation, is there a different approach for MSPs that might say, well, I don't know if I'm ready to do all of it. Maybe I can do the governance part or the risk part or do they all need to go together? And if they do, or if they are able to break these apart, is there a different potential profit from delivering each of these services? Help us understand if it's an all or nothing kind of a deal, or if an MSP is kind of looking at this as an opportunity, can they step into it in different phases maybe?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to consider, right? I'm going to pick on the insurance stuff because obviously we all like that, right? So when we're thinking of GRC as it relates to compliance or as it relates to cyber insurance, there is a govern factor, right? Insurance organizations are asking, do you have a business continuity plan, a disaster recovery plan, an incident response? Do you have documents of how you do stuff? All the documents need to be governed. Us as MSPs, we're facilitating that work, by the way, charging and better be charging for that work. But it's the customer's stuff. You hear me talk about this all the time. It's a very simple 4-part process: alignment, authorization, adoption, and assessment. Alignment. Are you following a thing? A framework, insurance, whatever. But we're not the ones authorizing it. It's our customers. They need to authorize it. They need to say, yes, that's our password, or yes, those are our humans. And then adoption. We're good to password policy if an end user doesn't sign off and adopt it. And then lastly, so it doesn't become shelfware, regularly assessing. So when you think of the opportunity of just the govern function, whether you're governing assets, hey, I review your assets once a month, are they right? And that could just be one stupid line item in your service. Or policies and procedures, working through the whole process. So if I had to think of, can I do this independently? Sure, there are things you can do independently, like governing assets. If you want to bring the whole thing full circle, oh my gosh, Mr. Customer, you have to deal with CMMC. You have to deal with SOC 2 ISO, insert mouthful of acronyms. Yes, that's a whole program of governance, risk, and compliance. Can you deliver them discreetly and uniquely? Sure, you can build a compliance as a service offering around that. That's what I was alluding to. And I think, Eric, that's what you were alluding to when you talk about cyber insurance. There's no compliance in cyber insurance, but you could build a compliance as a service offering to help meet insurance.
So there are obviously a number of vendors in the compliance space, specifically talking to MSPs, trying to help them enter this market, simplify the challenges of dealing with compliance. I hope most MSPs understand you can't just kind of buy a tool and that's the end of the story. A tool is part of the picture, but only part of the picture. Like you were saying, it's people, it's process, as well as technology. So, paints a larger picture of the skills, the capabilities, the level of sophistication that an MSP is going to need in order to offer a GRC service.
Yeah, so some of the skills that they would need, some of the types of humans that they would want to be able to have in their organization. Obviously, there's technical skills. Go put conditional access, enforce MFA. There's some technical abilities of being able to do the technical and tactical work. But there's the soft skills, like the art of negotiation, right? If you're going to roll something out, you kind of need to be able to start at the top with the executives and speak to them in their language and being able to negotiate with them like, yeah, everybody should have 2FA, including the CEO, regardless of how much you push back. So there's a little of that negotiation tactical. So there's a technical role of clicking ones and zeros. And then there's an account-facing kind of role where you have to be able to communicate and talk to the human rather than talking to the computer.
So, Tim, understanding that, you've got to have some technical skills, you got to have some chops, right? You've got to be able to manage the infrastructure and the cybersecurity services that you're deploying to your clients. Is this really an opportunity? I think we touched on it earlier in the conversation, but I just want to, come back to it and maybe add another level of clarity. Is this an opportunity that's reserved solely for really mature MSPs that, are at that level of just bringing on kind of this new service and maybe even, hiring folks that are very, very qualified to do that? Or can any MSP kind of put their toe in the water and then grow into something a little bit more substantial that adds real value to their existing clients and keep them out of trouble?
I love that you asked that question because we have MSPs of all sizes. I wouldn't say, we talk about operational maturity, business, all that kind of stuff. The single most important thing that an MSP can have to do this kind of work is a human that has become the champion, has been given the authority, the power, the time to do the work, right? We see this, whether it's a 600-person MSP or not, that fail because they haven't provided a champion to take that role on. I literally yesterday was part of our peer group. We have an MSP that's in the platform, 2 people, that's it, 2 staff members, super smart. Well, their nonprofit organization came to them and was like, hey, we've been asked for a written information security policy. What is a WISP? Well, because of not just our peer group and the platform and the resources and the whatever, I don't want to sit here and plug what we do. He was really well prepared to be like, oh, yeah, we have this service. I didn't talk to you about it because I figured it was like, but yes, we have a full-blown service that we can do to offer this to you. And yeah, we're just 2 people, but they've allowed themselves set time aside week by week by week to do the work. One of them has been empowered to be the client-facing role. One of them is empowered to do the technical role. So yeah, I have an MSP that's only 2 people that literally is about to land a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization and managing policies and procedures, just one component of the GRC program. And then I have other MSPs that are, 50, 60, 70, couple hundred employees that I can't even get on a stupid onboarding call. Right? So it isn't necessarily the maturity level or the number of staff as it is the willingness to do the work, the willingness to have a customer-facing role, and then empowering those people. No tool is ever going to give you the checkbox, regardless of all the baloney marketing you might see that's out there. Don't even get me going on that crap.
We've been talking about how widespread the need for GRC assistance, compliance assistance is out there, and the business opportunity that presents for MSPs. But we're also talking about the need for people with skills and the time to really dedicate to this. So there is investment required. And I kind of want to come at this from the other angle, an angle we haven't really covered before, which is, okay, if I'm going to have to make an investment in this, what are the risks I run if I decide not to do that? And I guess what I'm thinking is, if I've got clients who need compliance assistance and I'm not providing that assistance, where are they getting it? And what kind of danger does that pose? So if I'm trying to figure out risk versus reward here, how do you kind of talk to them about that risk equation of who's doing this work if you're not?
Yeah, Rich, great question. So, we see this a lot with CMMC specifically. MSPs, maybe they have a customer, maybe they have a prospect. We do see a lot that, like, I have a customer and we want to do CMMC, but they don't have the chops, they don't have the people, they haven't dedicated the time, all the objections that we talked about earlier. And the reality is should they even be doing that work? The number of MSPs that I hate to say I talk out of doing the work is astonishing. Like, it all comes back to, great, you have 700 customers across 9,000 different, verticals and disciplines. One of those happens to be CMMC. Are you going to completely change your business model and completely change the things you need to do for a customer that may or may not actually be profitable? That you may have to hire somebody or bring on, whether you bring on compliance scorecard professional services or another professional MSSP to help you, talking them out of the work and having that conversation. Like, MSPs don't want to leave money on the table, but if they are, say, niched or as niched as they could be, they're doing, maybe HIPAA, maybe FTC, maybe some sort of standardized offering. they can then start to build that offering out, really hone in on that, and then have that as a major reward because now they've been able to do it multiple times, wash, rinse, repeat with the people and the process and the platform and the tools, and then turn that into, doubling your revenue, increasing your profitability around that. So as far as the risk versus reward, hey, if you have one CMMC customer that isn't really willing to pay you today to do whatever basic stuff today, that would be a huge risk to bring them on in an MSP with very little reward. But hey, if you have 25 retailers and all of them deal with financial data, FTC safeguards, not only is it a easier framework, quote, quote, but now you have a huge niche of 25 people that you can learn how to do it really well on the first one or two and then make, bank on all the others going forward.
Tim, you're using a lot of keywords and phrases that are like music to MSP's ears, right? It's like leaving money on the table, making bank. Rich and I talk a lot on the podcast about AI and automation and integration and things like that. And I know that a big part of your value proposition is in the automation component of kind of delivering these services. But there's only so much of this compliance and GRC process, it sounds like, that can be automated. How should MSPs kind of consider the balance of that time requirement of, a human need and a human's, expectation to be really, really good at delivering that component versus what percentage of it, can automation solve for them? Just trying to get an idea for, scalability and capacity planning for these MSPs that are thinking about, entering into this arena.
Yeah. So first and foremost, let's just lay all the cards on the table. I see a lot of our competitors putting out automate 90% of your SOC 2 or ISO. And the reality is that's not exactly true today. But, if you actually start to use any of these products, first, you're going to find out that most of them don't integrate with MSP tools. So that 90% automation is gone because who cares about Monday.com and ClickUp and AWS? Because your MSP don't deal with that stuff. And so automation can be a big differentiator, but you'll never be able to remove the human from that process. Then AI, for the last couple of years, I've been pretty dead nuts against AI. But it has come a long way in the last, 3 to 6 months, even the last year. There are some really interesting GRC or compliance engineering components that can help with some of that, with a little bit of AI here, a little bit of automation there. I think you asked me earlier, the industry 3 to 5 years. I think that's going to be a big play down the road. I think it needs to catch up, though. So level setting, when you see that 90% automation, call bullshit, because I do. When you see the AI is going to replace my job, probably never going to happen, especially in GRC. I could probably go on and on and on. Remind me again of your original question here, so I'm not going too far off course.
I just kind of a forecasting, like how much time can I save leveraging automation versus how much time do I need to commit from a human labor perspective to really deliver something that adds real value rather than, like you say, just kind of relying on automation and AI to kind of smoke and mirror this thing.
Yeah. So as we start to help MSPs build out packaging and pricing and the resources needed to deliver the service, from a human level, at a minimum, you're going to want to spend an hour or two a month with a customer, at least using our platform. If you're doing it manually and in spreadsheets and all of that, there's a whole nother can of worms. Whether you use us or not, you're going to want, and we strongly urge, not just have that champion, but give them a minimum of an hour to an hour or 2 hours a week to do work. Now, whether you're doing spreadsheets and manual, that's a whole nother can of worms. But if you have tools and process in place, that hour or two a week, you can get really far. And, I could probably refer you to a couple of our MSPs that actually have been able to find 60 or 70% of reduction in time in labor in doing this work with the right process and the right platform. But we strongly suggest give the people an hour or two a week to do this work. I think when I last talked about, GTIA, formerly CompTIA, their Trustmark program, right? I don't know if you're all familiar with the Trustmark program. There's probably 120 hours worth of work to be able to get your entire house in order from a manual spreadsheet kind of thing. Now, would that same level of effort be in a SOC 2 or a CMMC? Maybe, maybe not, right? So the answer is it depends. I like to help and, coach our MSPs in our peer group and in our platform, dedicate an hour or two a week. And what will happen as you get more efficient, still bill the customer an hour or two a week, but because you're going to have process and platforms to help streamline that, your actual labor will be reduced.
Yeah, appreciate that, Tim. Sounds pretty doable for most MSPs.
Yeah, I can give you a very specific example because we build a pricing calculator. Now, again, I don't want to talk about my platform and plug what we're doing, but cyber liability insurance, okay? When you think about the govern, the process, the assessment, the components of meeting cyber insurance with the requirements that we think should be part of that program, there's about 20 to 25 hours. Setting up the policies, getting them written appropriately, conducting a baseline assessment, now that's not remediation. Remediation's a whole ball of wax because that's going to be dependent on every single MSP's difference. But we see like 20 to 25 hours. You could do that all in 1 week if you just took 1 week and did it. Obviously, you can't because of fires and whatever. But with the right, now you have a process and now you have a platform, we can get that down to 5 or 6 hours a month or less. So that 20 to 25 hours, that initial setup, that initial getting my own house in order and then replicating that to my customer, 5, 6 hours a month if you're lucky. An hour a week, I guess. If you think of the average week is 4.3, it's an hour a week, 5 hours a week. Yeah, you get the math. But that initial building out a cyber liability compliance as a service offering internally, 20, 25 hours. And we do that with a Kickstart program that's 12 weeks with our, again, I don't want to plug what we're doing, but we can get you from 0 to hero in 12 weeks. And you now have an offering you can take and charge for $500 or $600 a month for.
Yeah, this was going to be my final question here of the conversation, basically, for that MSP in our audience who maybe is persuaded, per Eric, that this is actually doable and something that I want to be doing so that my competitors aren't talking to my clients about it and I'm making the money that you're talking about and so on. Where do you get started? Basically, after they have finished listening to and enjoying this podcast, what should they do to get going?
Go to compliancescorecard.com and click on sign up. No, I'm kidding. So listen, whether you choose my platform or I'm supposed to use the word our, whether you choose our platform and our governance as a service platform or not, or you choose spreadsheets and SharePoint and Word docs, how do you get started? Pick a framework and get your own house in order. Now, if you want to do that with a platform and get all that together, of course, you could come here. You can go to any of our competitors. Doesn't really matter. I mean, it does matter. I want you to come here. So I want to make sure I'm saying that. But where do you start? Pick a framework, understand the controls, start building out your own policies and procedures, do your own assessment. It's like going to the doctor. Hey, I have this pain. Well, we need to figure out where you are, why it hurts, what you're doing, before we can put you into physical therapy and remediation. Start by getting your own house in order. Whether you pick CIS, FTC, mouthful of any other acronym for that matter, insurance, start with basic cyber hygiene. Get your own house in order. Build your own policies and procedures and assessment components. You're going to figure out what works for you along the way, which then you can offer to your customers. And if you want it done with you, for you, or alongside you, Compliance Scorecard's platform and our newly launched Kickstart 12-week bootcamp, Hero to Zero or Zero to Hero in 12 weeks, whatever marketing stupid words I'm supposed to use.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for joining us here on the show and discussing this really important topic with us. For folks in the audience who want to get in touch, learn more about you, you've told them where to go to learn more about Compliance Scorecard, but where would you point people who are interested in getting in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm relaunching my personal website, timgolden.com, which is kind of ugly and gross at the moment, but cobbler's shoes and all. If you can't find me on Reddit, Facebook, or LinkedIn, you probably shouldn't be doing computer work, period. It's funny. People give me crap all the time, and they refer to me as Roy Kent. Are you familiar with Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
So Roy Kent, his chant, whenever that happened, was he's here, he's there, he's every blank and where. So they refer to me as the Roy Kent of IT and compliance because I'm literally everywhere.
That is a title you can wear proudly. Actually, you and Roy Kent, I love it. Tim Golden, CEO, founder of Compliance Scorecard. Thank you again for joining us on the show here, folks. Eric and I are going to take a quick break. We come back on the other slide. He and I are going to share a few thoughts about compliance and about this very interesting conversation with Tim. We're going to have a little fun, wrap up the show. Stick around. We are going to be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of this episode of the MSP Chat podcast. Thanks once more to Tim Golden for joining us to talk about compliance. Eric, I kind of want to underscore more or less the last thing Tim was talking about there, this idea of getting your own house in order. Because again, there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot to this idea of getting into compliance or GRC, even if you're not doing it now. And this idea of picking one challenge and actually making sure that you yourself are compliant in that regard, it's actually a great way to put your toe in the water a little bit there. You're doing work that you should be doing anyway to make sure that your company is as secure and compliant as it can be when it's dealing with its customers and so on. You might decide after you finish up that process, you don't really want to go beyond that. But it's a great starting point, actually, to do the work that you in a lot of cases probably should have done before. Get your own house in order, and then see where that takes you. Basically, once you've sort of learned the ropes a little bit.
Yeah, Rich, it's we've all heard that old adage. Eat your own caviar, right? You gotta adopt something first before you begin delivering it to your clients or recommending it or whatever. And this isn't the same as when I had my MSP. It's like, oh well, we're gonna put in that VoIP system here so that we can then tell clients how great it is. Or when clients call in and ask a technician while they're closing their ticket, hey, Eric's talking to me about this VoIP solution. How do you guys like it? So they have something more to say than, yeah, we don't use it, right? This is much, much different than that. I mean, this is such a important solution and service and top of mind for many clients. There's risk involved. I mean, this is one of those where you're just going to go out and just resell something. I mean, I feel you are required to have this in place in your own organization and go through all of it and maintain it so that you have that ongoing direct experience so that you can learn from your own uh, adoption of this and know better how to share that experience with clients and set the expectations and what it takes to maintain and deliver this. And most importantly, Rich, express the value of this, because, we're not talking about race to the bottom on pricing here. This is a very, very valuable services for organizations that need to maintain compliance. They have budgets set aside to do this. So we better be on our best, in our best position to say, not only are we maintaining and managing this for you, but we also are maintaining our own compliance, just so that you know that we are in sync on that. So that's a really good takeaway there. I think the other thing that I really appreciated was when, Tim unknowingly agreed with me to say, well, at least get your clients in compliance with their cyber insurance policies. I mean, that's step one. And once you get there and they see how that works, then I think it opens the door up for larger conversations for you to then talk about the next level of opportunity, or to even open the door to selling them your, enhanced cybersecurity portfolio, leading up to maybe some compliance discussions. It's just getting that client to start thinking differently about their business and the risk that they're under, and allowing you then to then present them these solutions that are candidly great for you, them, their clients, and all of your other clients as well as an MSP.
All right. Well, folks, that leaves us with time for just one last thing on the show here. And it comes to us from the UK, and this is the kind of thing that we run into in the world of branding and advertising. That there's an investment firm out in the UK called Aberdeen. They've been in business for quite a while, and as companies will sometimes, I guess they just decided that this brand of ours could use a refresh. Let's modernize it a little bit. They came up with the brilliant idea of retaining the name Aberdeen, just removing all the vowels from the name so that it would look kind of different and fresh and modern. And of course, you and I were talking about this off the air. You looked at the name, didn't even know how to pronounce it, right? There are no vowels in there. What is this name now? Well, it turns out you are not alone, Eric. A lot of people out there encountered this new brand, didn't really know what to make of it. And so they are backtracking. The vowels are coming back, but they still want to modernize and freshen up that brand. So what is take two? Well, they put the vowels back in place, but it's all lowercase letters now, Eric. So there's that.
And for those folks in the audience that can visualize kind of what we're saying, so the company name has always been Aberdeen, Aberdeen, and the vowels that they removed were the E's. So 3 E's were missing. So I'm looking at this going Abrdn. It's like, is it Airbnb? It's almost weird to say it. So now they've replaced those 3 E's, but the awesome upgrade is it's all lowercase now. So yes, progress.
And I am just going to go out on a limb and advise the MSPs in our audience, leave the vowels in your name and you stick with the capital letters. I think all in all, you're going to be happier with capital letters and vowels. Well, folks, that is all the time we've got for you this week on the MSP Chat Podcast. We thank you so much for joining us. We're going to see you in a week's time with another episode. Until then, I will simply remind you that this is both a video and an audio podcast, which means that if you are listening to us right now, but you'd like to check us out on video, you can go to YouTube, look up MSP Chat. You'll find us there. If you are watching us on YouTube, but you're into audio podcasts as well, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever it is you get your audio podcasts. You'll find us there also. And wherever it is you find us, please subscribe, rate, review. It's going to help other folks like you find and enjoy the show. This show is produced by the great Russ Johns. It is edited by the great Riley Simpson. They're part of the team with us here at Channel Mastered. They are ready, willing, and able to create a podcast for you if you are into that idea. And podcasts, folks, tiny piece of what we do for our clients at Channel Master. If you want to really understand all of the services that we can provide, go to www.channelmastered.com. Channel Mastered has a sister organization called MSP Mastered. That's Eric working one-to-one with MSPs on helping them grow and optimize their business. You can learn more about that at www.mspmastered.com. So once again, we thank you for joining us. We'll see you in a week on the next episode of the show. Until then, please, folks, always remember, you cannot spell channel without MSP.